Earlier the WASP women that went west on the wagon trains, all that energy, like Portnoy's mother, you know, is now all in the little apartment, the little house with the three children and the husband, so she has to follow him to the bathroom, check the bowel movement, you know, follow him to college, you know. So the Jewish mother and all the other Jewish mothers that weren't Jewish, that were Italian and WASP and everything else, becomes a swear word, you know, becomes a lethal, cancerous thing, you know, that is going to just snuff all the life, you know, out of the poor, passive, sad man, you know, who is being followed around by this monstrous giant of a woman because, in fact, she is another human being with all this energy that she was supposed to use by everything that told her what it was to be a woman on this one narrow focus, okay? That's the way it was. That's the way it was. And I'm just reminding you, ancient history, but it's not that ancient, that if there was a conference like this then, there wouldn't have been a conference like this then. Or it would be the woman problem. What can we do to get women to adjust to their role as wives and mothers, you know? And maybe they're having too much education. That edge making them neurotic, you know. And, you know, why can't they adjust? Or the therapists. I went to a conference in the Midwest about not quite 20 years ago on the female orgasm. And then all the marriage therapists and the family therapists were men. And they had just discovered the vibrator. Someone had invented the vibrator, you know. And Masters and Johnson and all of them were, they were. They were discussing why women weren't having orgasms and that, well, the man told about this. He invented this thing like a bicycle pump or something like that. And all these men were getting so juicy about what they could do to these women, you know, with all this machinery, you know, and they were going on like this, and there were a few women therapists sitting there, and I don't know what they were thinking, but I got sneaked into this conference because my book had just come out, and they had asked me to speak, and Mary Amanis had tipped me off this conference was going to be held, and she said, one of us better go, and so I finally got up, and I said, you know, I don't think we need more machinery. You know, like, you know, I said, I said, doesn't it occur to anybody that there might be something in the condition of woman that is making her mad? You know, that's why she isn't having the orgasm. You know, like, and you know, like this, but I mean, you cannot believe these men. And one of the men finally said, he thought that the enthusiasm might be getting too much. He said, now, gentlemen, he said, let's be calm, let's not get carried away. After all, we don't want to become too threatening to the human penis. Well, all right. This period back then, though the happy housewife was supposed to be so ecstatic and everything else, was obviously something was terribly wrong. Because why did any book that promised 88 ways to make sex life more exciting or the act of love endurable become a bestseller? You know, something was terribly wrong in the American bedroom. There were all these case histories of children, and to cure it, somehow you had to take the mother, the dominating mother, off and give her some therapy so she'd get some other interests and so on and so forth. Anyway, we broke through that feminine mystique. And we began the modern women's movement. And the modern women's movement was necessary, not because I or anybody else came along and, like the Witch of Salem, somehow or other, you know, some female Pied Piper seducing otherwise happy housewives that would still be having orgasms, waxing the kitchen floor, you know, and taking out their rage on the kids. They wouldn't be having orgasms at all, you know, if we hadn't come along. It had to happen from evolutionary necessity, that in the lifespan that is now approaching 80 years for women, though it's only 70 for men, we'll get to that later, you know, and with the evolution of work beyond the simplicities of mama and papa's shop and the family farm, and where even the work that women used to be doing in the home that didn't necessarily give her equality, but a self-respecting share of the work is done out in the society and professions, and doesn't require big muscles, increasingly, but requires qualities of human intelligence. So it was necessary, and it was urgent, and it was possible. With women now having control of their reproductive process, and with so many children not needing to be born, and with women so many living so many years beyond childbirth, for women finally to confront their own personhood in society, to move out of that feminine mystique, to move out of that definition of the woman solely in terms of man. It wasn't the male-female relationship. If you're going to stick just within that, you are never going to see what happened or what's happening now. It was the necessity of woman to become a person and move in society herself that changed, that broke through, that changed the equation. That was an evolutionary necessity. And once women did it, the whole gestalt changed. The modern women's movement had to happen because it was no longer possible for women to live their whole lives in terms of that childbearing function, anatomy, is destiny that had always defined women in the past. Motherhood, which had always defined women before, was now only a fact of women's life who chose to be mothers. It might be a major fact, a dominant fact in the years of young motherhood, but it was no longer, you know, it could no longer define them, give them function, status in society, lifelong. So women were forced to move into society as a person, to define themselves as a person. The personhood of woman was the essence of the women's movement. And once the woman said, I am a person, not just defined in relation to, not just my husband's wife, my children's mother, though I may still be that, then she, being an American woman, and the modern women's movement did explode in America first, not coincidentally. It was her human and American birthright, equality of opportunity, of voice in the decisions of your society, of your own destiny, her own voice, her active voice, active participation, human freedom, human dignity, the individual, all of that. But that was revolutionary for women. And that made a hell of a lot of difference. And that began the chain that is taking women and therefore man out of this terrible, deathly bind, this bind that Herb talked about. Not anything really to do with man in a certain sense. The necessity of woman to move as a person in society, and to the problem that has no name, I called it, because there was no name for that problem. Because it didn't have to do with the children. It didn't have to do with the husband. About the woman herself. Who was she herself? What was she going to do with her own life? You know, what was she going to do in society? In the course of getting from there to here, there's a lot of murk. There were some diversions. There was a lot of rage that had been repressed, covertly taken out, as Herb described, now out in the open, and there were some mistakes about that rage. There was a whole rhetoric, a whole ideology, as if what this movement was all about was somehow woman, as an oppressed class, rising up to take the power away from man, the class, the oppressors, and therefore, down with man. What does that 10 mean? What? 10, oh, well, because you keep holding it. It can't be just, all right, you know, that the whole thing was down with man, down with marriage, down with motherhood, down with everything women had done to attract or please men or serve men, or then down with everything that had ever characterized men, the male chauvinist, pigs, the monsters responsible for every rapist, they're responsible for everything bad in our society. You know, absolute explosion of that rage that women used to take out passively on themselves. And then an ideological mistake. We who started the women's movement did it out of our own condition as women, and in terms, I think, just of the natural, we take them for granted in America, the values of American democracy, what I learned growing up in Peoria, Illinois, where Lincoln was my culture hero. You know, that's all. So I did, in the essence, the women's movement seemed a movement without ideology, because it was merely these values that we take for granted of American democracy: human dignity, human freedom, the value of the individual, the right to move to your own, grow to your own potential, equal opportunity, voice in your